flat and three-cornered, containing sundry small adornments which were to be put on upstairs, and which the friend put on, talking incessantly. When Miss Squeers had done the friend's hair, the friend did Miss Squeers's hair, throwing in some striking improvements in the way of ringlets down the neck, and then, when they were both touched up to their entire satisfaction, they went downstairs in full state, with the long gloves on, all ready for company. "Where's John, 'Tilda?" said Miss Squeers. "Only gone home to clean himself," replied the friend. "He'll be here by the time the tea's drawn." "I do so palpitate," observed Miss Squeers. "Ah, I know what it is," replied the friend. "I've not been used to it, you know, 'Tilda," said Miss Squeers, applying her hand to the left side of her sash. "You'll soon get the better of it, dear," rejoined the friend. While they were talking thus, the hungry servant brought in the tea things, and soon afterwards somebody tapped at the room door. "There he is!" cried Miss Squeers. "Oh, 'Tilda!" "Hush!" said 'Tilda. "Say, come in." "Come in!" cried Miss Squeers faintly, and in walked Nicholas. "Good evening," said that young gentleman, all unconscious of his conquest. "I understood from Mr. Squeers that—" "Oh yes, it's all right," interposed Miss Squeers. "Father don't tea with us, but you won't mind that, I dare say." This was said archly. Nicholas opened his eyes at this, but he turned the matter off very coolly, not caring particularly about anything just then, and went through the ceremony of introduction to the miller's daughter with so much grace that that young lady was lost in admiration. "We're only waiting for one more gentleman," said Miss Squeers, taking off the teapot lid and looking in to see how the tea was getting on. It was a matter of equal moment to Nicholas whether they were waiting for one gentleman or 20, so he received the intelligence with perfect unconcern, and, being out of spirits, and not seeing any especial reason why he should make himself agreeable, looked out of the window and sighed involuntarily. As luck would have it, Miss Squeers's friend was of a playful turn, and, hearing Nicholas sigh, she took it into her head to rally the lovers on their lowness of spirits. "But if it's caused by my being here," said the young lady, "don't mind me a bit, for I'm quite as bad. You may go on just as you would if you were alone." "'Tilda," said Miss Squeers, colouring up to the top row of curls, "I'm ashamed of you." And here the two friends burst into a variety of giggles, and glanced from time to time over the tops of their pocket handkerchiefs at Nicholas, who, from a state of unmixed astonishment, gradually fell into one of irrepressible laughter, occasioned partly by the bare notion of his being in love with Miss Squeers, and partly by the preposterous appearance and behaviour of the two girls. These two causes of merriment, taken together, struck him as being so keenly ridiculous that, despite his miserable condition, he laughed till he was thoroughly exhausted. "Well," thought Nicholas, "as I am here, and seem expected for some reason or other to be amiable, it's of no use looking like a goose. I may as well accommodate myself to the company." We blush to tell it, but his youthful spirits and vivacity getting for the time the better of his sad thoughts, he no sooner formed this resolution than he saluted Miss Squeers and the friend with great gallantry, and drawing a chair to the tea table, began to make himself more at home than in all probability an usher has ever done in his employer's house since ushers were first invented. The ladies were in the full delight of this altered behaviour on the part of Mr. Nickleby, when the expected swain arrived, with his hair very damp from recent washing, and a clean shirt, whereof the collar might have belonged to some giant ancestor, forming, together with a white waistcoat of similar dimensions, the chief ornament of his person. "Well, John," said Miss Matilda Price, which, by the bye, was the name of the miller's daughter. "Well," said John, with a grin that even the collar could not conceal. "I beg your pardon," interposed Miss Squeers, hastening to do the honours. "Mr. Nickleby, Mr. John Browdie." "Servant, sir," said John, who was something over 6 feet high, with a face and body rather above the due proportion than below it. "Yours to command, sir," replied Nicholas, making fearful ravages on the bread and butter. Mr. Browdie was not a gentleman of great conversational powers, So he grinned twice more, and having now bestowed his customary mark of recognition on every person in company, grinned at nothing in particular, and helped himself to food. 'Old woman away, bean't she?' said Mr. Browdie, with his mouth full. Miss Squeers nodded assent. Mr. Browdie gave a grin of special width, as if he thought that really was something to laugh at, and went to work at the bread and butter with increased vigour. It was quite a sight to behold how he and Nicholas emptied the plate between them. 'You won't get bread and butter every night, I expect, man,' said Mr. Browdie, after he sat staring at Nicholas a long time over the empty plate. Nicholas bit his lip and coloured, but affected not to hear the remark. 'Ecod,' said Mr. Browdie, laughing boisterously, 'they don't put too much into 'em. You'll be nought but skin and bones if you stop here long enough.' 'You are facetious, sir,' said Nicholas scornfully. 'Nay, I don't know,' replied Mr. Browdie, 'but t'other teacher, 'cod he were a learner, he were.' The recollection of the last teacher's leanness seemed to afford Mr. Browdie the most exquisite delight, for he laughed until he found it necessary to apply his coat cuffs to his eyes. 'I don't know whether your perceptions are quite keen enough, Mr. Browdie, to enable you to understand that your remarks are offensive,' said Nicholas in a towering passion, 'but if they are, have the goodness to—' 'If you say another word, John,' shrieked Miss Price, stopping her admirer's mouth as he was about to interrupt, 'only half a word, I'll never forgive you or speak to you again.' 'Well, my lass, I don't care about 'un,' said the corn factor, bestowing a hearty kiss on Miss Matilda. 'Let 'un gang on, let 'un gang on.' It now became Miss Squeers's turn to intercede with Nicholas, which she did with many symptoms of alarm and horror. The effect of the double intercession was, that he and John Browdie shook hands across the table with much gravity, and such was the imposing nature of the ceremonial that Miss Squeers was overcome, and shed tears. 'What's the matter, Fanny?' said Miss Price. 'Nothing, 'Tilda,' replied Miss Squeers, sobbing. 'There never was any danger,' said Miss Price, 'was there, Mr. Nickleby?' 'None at all,' replied Nicholas. 'Absurd.' 'That's right,' whispered Miss Price. 'Say something kind to her, and she'll soon come round. Here, shall John and I go into the little kitchen, and come back presently?' 'Not on any account,' rejoined Nicholas, quite alarmed at the proposition. 'What on earth should you do that for?' 'Well,' said Miss Price, beckoning him aside, and speaking with some degree of contempt, 'you are a one to keep company.' 'What do you mean?' said Nicholas. 'I'm not a one to keep company at all, here at all events. I can't make this out.' 'No, nor I neither,' rejoined Miss Price. 'But men are always fickle, and always were, and always will be. That I can make out very easily.' 'Fickle!' cried Nicholas. 'What do you suppose? You don't mean to say that you think—' 'Oh no, I think nothing at all,' retorted Miss Price, pettishly. 'Look at her, dressed so beautiful, and looking so well—really, almost handsome. I'm ashamed at you.' 'My dear girl, what have I got to do with her dressing beautifully or looking well?' inquired Nicholas. 'Come, don't call me a dear girl,' said Miss Price, smiling a little though, for she was pretty, and a coquette too, in her small way, and Nicholas was good looking, and she supposed him the property of somebody else, which were all reasons why she should be gratified to think she had made an impression on him. 'Or Fanny will be saying it's my fault. Come, we're going to have a game at cards.' Pronouncing these last words aloud, she tripped away and rejoined the big Yorkshireman. This was wholly unintelligible to Nicholas, who had no other distinct impression on his mind at the moment than that Miss Squeers was an ordinary looking girl, and her friend Miss Price a pretty one. But he had not time to enlighten himself by reflection, for the hearth being by this time swept up, and the candles snuffed, they sat down to play speculation. 'There are only 4 of us, 'Tilda,' said Miss Squeers, looking slyly at Nicholas, 'so we had better go partners, 2 against 2. 'What do you say, Mr. Nickleby?' inquired Miss Price. 'With all the pleasure in life,' replied Nicholas; and so saying, quite unconscious of his heinous offence, he amalgamated into one common heap those portions of a Dotheboys Hall card of terms which represented his own counters, and those allotted to Miss Price, respectively.